Welcome to Weekly Parsha Insights.
Chasal Sidir Pesach Kil Chusoi Kachal Mishputoi Chikusoi Kasher Zuchitni Lesadai Lo Yisoi Kain Nizgala
So it is Parashat Pekudei this week, but we will be giving the shir today on Pesach. This week and next week, I'd like to spend the time to go through some of the themes of Pesach for the purpose of mentally and spiritually preparing for the Yom Tov. Next week, Mitzvah Hashem, I wish to focus on Seder night in particular and on the theme of Emunah. But today, there's two other themes I wish to focus on. The first is getting rid of Chometz, not from a halachic standpoint. And the second, which we'll see follows on from there, is Cheirus, finding your personal freedom in the Yom Tov of Pesach. So, in these weeks, no doubt you will have observed or participated at home that we're all busy cleaning our houses and preparing for Pesach. And in the simplest way, what we're doing in preparation is we're preparing to get rid of Chometz. And halachically speaking, that's the priority. It's an absolute priority for Pesach. There should be no Chometz. Bali roya, bali matzah, you're not allowed to see, you're not allowed to have Chometz at all. And to transgress and to have Chometz is a very serious affair, so of course that has to be the focus. And it's important, whatever we're going to talk about tonight, to not forget the basics and to keep yourselves within the framework of halacha. You need to find out what's considered chometz, what's not considered chometz, what you're allowed to keep, what you're not allowed to keep. You have different minhagim about selling, etc. Ask your local rabbi for any questions you may have. And in terms of this year as well, with Erev Pesach being on Shabbos, there's a lot to contend with in terms of working things out. So make sure you get all that in place. The shir is not intended to negate any of that practical, halachic, important stuff. But in Yiddishkeit, as always, there are layers. There are layers to Shmiras HaMitzvahs. There are layers to observance. And what we're going to try and do, in order to gain from Torah Mitzvahs, you need to apply a little bit more curiosity. You need to be able to get to the depths of what the mitzvah is really about, and then you can connect it on a whole different level. So let's try and understand the topic, the theme of Chometz, Matzah, etc., with a little bit more, mainly Chometz, with a bit more depth. We begin with the Gemara in Brachos Yud Zayin Amud Aleph. The Gemara tells us how Rabbi Alexandri would have a specific tefillah, which he would add after davening. And the Gemara says like this: Rabbi Alexandri Bosar de Matzli Omar Hochi. After Rabbi Alexandri had davened, he would say the following tefillah: Ribono Olamim, talking to the Ribono Shel Olam. Golav Yodu Alefanecha, it's known and revealed in front of you. That deep down our desire is to do your will, is to fulfill your will. Or mima akev. So what stops us doing the right thing? Sa'or shabe'isa. The sa'or, which is sourdough, which is another term for chometz, that's in the dough, for shibud malchias, and the fact that we are subject to the pressures of being under the kingships of the world, not on our own terms, etc. And the Gemara continues with the tefillah that Hashem should save us from their hands and enable us to serve Hashem properly. Says Rashi, Sa'or Shabe'isa, this terminology of Sa'or Shabe'isa, Yetzahara Shebelevavenu. It's the Yetzahara in our hearts. So Rabbi Alexandri is talking to the Ribono Shel Olam, and he's saying, look, really, as a Yid, we want to do the right thing. What stops us doing the right thing? The Yetzahara. But the term for Yetzirah that he uses is the term Sa'or. And as I said, Sa'or is a Lashon, Rashi tells us, Sa'or means Chometz. And yet Sa'or is being used to describe Yetzirah. The Kadakemach takes this Gemara and he expounds on this connection between Chometz and Yetzirah even more. He says, look, Min HaYodua, he says, this is Kadakemach Pesach Aleph Hey. It's well known that within Chometz, the topic, the theme of Chometz, there is a remez to the Yetzirah. And a person, as we know, is instructed to fight his Yetzer Hara, to have his Yetzer Tov win over his Yetzer Hara, as a general conduct of a Jew. And he brings the Gemara we just quoted, and he says, since Chometz has the Yetzer Hara, has a remez to Yetzer Hara, says the Kadakemach Mikan Yesh Lanu Remez, Shekeshem She'onu Mitzuvim Levatel HaChometz Belev Min HaTorah, Kach Onu Chayovim Levatel Yetzer Hara Me'alev. Says the Kadakemach, in the same way that we are instructed to get rid of Chometz, so too we are instructed to get rid of the Yetzer Hara from our heart, V'shelo Yimshal Banu, that the Yetzer Hara shouldn't rule over us. And this is what the Pesach means when it says Tashbisu, you should destroy the Chometz, says the Kadakemach. Doesn't just mean the physical Chometz that we have to get rid of and we must get rid of, but importantly, it means equally also to get rid of the Yetzer Hara. So the Kadakemach is pointing to clearly, not just pointing to it, he's expressing it clearly. Hidden within the mitzvah to get rid of Chometz is the mitzvah to be mevatel Chometz, to get rid of Chometz, which is the Yetzer Hara, which is in our heart. And he continues with a number of interesting observations which show in parallel Chometz and Yetzer Hara. He says, for example, Chazal say that we need to do bittul belev. We need to engage with our heart and be completely and totally mevatel, make nothing out of the Chometz. Similarly, this idea of bittul, depending on the heart, says the Kadakemach, is the Pesach in Bereshis Ches Chaf Aleph, Ki Yetzer Leva Adam Ram and Urav. The Yetzer of a person, the Yetzer Hara of a person, which is bad, is what described in the Pesach as Yetzer Lev. It's described as the Yetzer of the heart. So just like Chometz, we need to get rid of from the heart, Yetzer Hara, which we need to fight, resides in our heart. That's one level of comparison. He continues, says the Kadakemach, in the same way that we instructed to get rid of Chometz, to destroy Chometz, but to search v'livdoik habayis b'churin u'b'stakin, to search the nooks and the crannies within a house, to make sure we don't miss any area as we look for Chometz. Similarly, he says, we're instructed to look within oneself, and try and discover with some healthy self-awareness where it is that the Yetzer Hara is lying within oneself, and look to fight it and get rid of it. And yet another final comparison he makes is that just like B'dikas Chometz, as we know, takes place not by the light of the sun and not by the light of the moon, but rather by the light of a candle, by a nair. He says, Kach B'dikas Yetzer Hara, so too when we are boidik, when we search within ourselves to fight and to get rid of the Yetzer Hara, it has to be done by the light of our neshama, which is called nair, which is called a candle, because nair Hashem nishmas Adam. So with this, the Kadakemach has painted a picture that we don't just happen to call the Yetzer Hara another name of Sa'or, which happens to be the same name for Chometz. There's a huge correlation between the Yetzer Hara and Chometz. And in the same way that we're instructed to get rid of Chometz from our heart, we're instructed to be mevatel, to get rid of Chometz from within us, to be completely and totally annul the Chometz. In the same way, we should seek, says the Kadakemach, to annul, so to speak, the Yetzer Hara as we do so. In Sefer Derech Hashem, he deepens our understanding and the significance of this. And he goes back to Mitzrayim. And he first begins with a comment, which, if you've been or listened to Shiurim this year, you will have heard us make a similar comment from other Mefarshim. That up until Yetzias Mitzrayim, Hayu Yisrael ma'urovim b'shar ha'umayis goy b'kerev goy. Klal Yisrael were completely indistinguishable, almost, from the other goyim from the Mitzrayim. They had fallen to such a level that their conduct was almost indistinguishable. They were completely mixed in because of their low spiritual standing. Says the Derech Hashem, Obi Itziosam, but when Klal Yisrael left Mitzrayim, nigalu v'nivdelu. It was at that point that they were redeemed. At that point they became separate. Says the Derech Hashem, as they're leaving Mitzrayim and they're becoming separate, what they're doing is they're preparing their guf, they're preparing themselves for the moment, for the true ultimate goal of Torah and Avodah, which would have been Kabbalas HaTorah, that was to come. But therefore, says the Derech Hashem, we couldn't possibly have Chometz at that point. When we left Mitzrayim, we left it in a moment of separating ourselves from the Goyim, of looking to concentrate on spiritual pursuit, on drawing near to Maimed Har Sinai, to Tavdun Nesalikim Al Hor Hazeh, which was the goal, the stated goal of Yetzias Mitzrayim. At that moment, says the Derech Hashem, we couldn't possibly have Chometz, and that's why we got rid of Chometz when we had the Korban Pesach that night, and then when we left in the morning, we had dough on our shoulders, which was matzah, not Chometz. Why? Because Inyan HaChimutz, says the Derech Hashem, Shehu Dovar Tivi Balechem, L'Sheyeh Kal Ho'ikul V'Tuvatam. What Chometz does, when you have dough, and you allow for it to rise, essentially what that does is it allows for the dough to become gut gebackt. It comes well baked, which gives it a nicer taste and also makes it easier for digestion. So by allowing a dough to rise and become chometz, what chometz essentially does is it makes the dough nicer and easier to eat. Similarly, says the Derech Hashem, the Yetzer Hara within us is the driving force that enables us to have more of a tam from this world, from physical desires. It is the Yetzer Hara that pulls us in that direction and that enables us to have a greater tam from physicality. So think about it, says the Derech Hashem. Klal Yisrael are leaving Mitzrayim. They're leaving Mitzrayim in order to become distinct, in order to become the Am HaNivchar, in order to be the special nation who are going to receive the Torah. What are they after at this point? They are after more and more spirituality. They're not after more physicality. Therefore, it's appropriate, says the Derech Hashem, at this point that HaKadosh Baruch Hu takes away, disallows Chometz. Chometz pulls a person more towards physicality, towards desires of this world. Take away the Chometz. Only have matzah, because then you'll have more of a spiritual experience. And says the Derech Hashem, and this is exactly what plays out when we, every year on Pesach, we do the same. Lizman miyuchet, says the Derech Hashem, for a short period of time on Pesach, Klal Yisrael have been instructed to stop having chometz and to have matzah. Why? Liyois mematim ba'atzmom koyach hayetzer hara. In order to reduce the strength, the level of koyach and energy that the Yetzer Hara would normally have. V'higbir ba'atzmom ha'iskarvus elo ruchnius. And contrary to giving power to the Yetzer Hara, we'd rather concentrate and focus and increase our closeness to spirituality, to the Rebbeinu Shalom. For a short and specific time, says the Derech Hashem, on Chag HaPesach, we are instructed to withdraw from chometz, just eat the simple matzah, because we want to weaken the Yetzer Hara's hold over us. And we want to strengthen the desire that we have to pursue Ruchnius and pursue HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And here comes the most powerful words of the entire Derech Hashem shtickle. V'hinei zeh Ika inyonoi shel Chag HaMatzos. Says the Derech Hashem, this concept that we just spoke out now is the main theme of Chag HaMatzos of Pesach. Isn't that astonishing? We run around, and as I began the shir very clearly, correctly so, we run around making ourselves crazy, getting rid of chometz, and it's absolutely correct to do so. It's the halacha. Get rid of chometz. Concentrate on that, no question. But hayitochen that a person should do a mitzvah and miss the theme of the mitzvah? The Derech Hashem says the main purpose and theme of Pesach, of Chag HaMatzos, is what we just described. That it's what chometz represents, that we should also be giving thought to. That we should be looking to get rid of the Yetzer Hara within us. And this is the main theme. So when we remove now chometz from our homes in these weeks, and obviously, the closer we get to Pesach with Bedikas chometz and Bir chometz, we now have a whole new perspective with which we do so. And yeah, as I say, halacha, getting rid of the chometz is important, absolutely, not to negate that. But at the same time, we should also come at it with another deeper understanding of what's really going on and what we should allow this to percolate in our own mind and allow for ourselves to get rid of the Yetzer Hara on some level. And by the way, it's also interesting to me because I think it gave a helpful perspective thinking ahead to Pesach. I don't know what the minhagim are in your homes, but generally speaking, on Pesach, you've got less to eat than during the year. At least the food is different. We've got less to eat. Maybe it's not such a bad thing. Maybe what the Derech Hashem is pointing us to is we're supposed to be on a bit of a diet on Pesach. It's a Pesach diet of don't get so tempted and pulled in by the physicality. I could talk for myself over here, right? I mean, it's we all have our challenges. Don't get so pulled in by the physicality, and actually use Pesach as a time to leverage the situation we're in anyway. We can't really have much goodness of the world to focus on ruchnius, focus on spiritual food. Continuing on this theme, the Pele Yoetz also speaks out. Pele Yoetz and Kuf Lamed Zayin Chometz. He says that the mitzvah of Biur Chometz is great, because of the remez, which is that we're getting rid of the Yetzer Hara as we get rid of the Chometz. And he says, Kol Yad Hamar Belevdoi Karizem Meshubach. It's an interesting lashon because we say this lashon in Agoda Shal Pesach, Kol Hamar Belevdoi Meshubach, and it's not a lashon that's used very much in very many places in the Torah, as far as the best of my knowledge. It's not really a lashon that's used. But the Pele Yoetz borrows that lashon and he puts it in here. That if you're marbe livdoik, if you increase your searches for chametz, harizem mashrovach, you're praiseworthy. And obviously what he means to say with this is that the more work and effort a person puts in to fighting against his Yetzer Hara, recognizing where his battles are with the Yetzer Hara, then he's more praiseworthy. There's an interesting line here, which again I think explains something. Just sort of brackets. He writes, Ike mitzvah zu, hi mateles al hanoshim, lechabed habatim yofe yofe. The main mitzvah of this getting rid of chometz is on the women of the household to make sure they clean the house well. And it's very interesting to me because I don't know about you, but I've wondered how it came to pass that the women have taken such a great big portion of the mitzvah to get rid of chometz. I think it's fair to say in most households it's the woman who sort of leads the way with the Pesach cleaning. And it's an interesting thing because in every other area of Yiddishkeit we always say the man leads and everything else. And yet with this we're very happy for the ladies to lead. All right, there's a domesticated element to it, you could say that. But the Pele Yoetz is saying, no, the main thing actually is for the women to clean. So that's a good one to go home to your wives with. Don't quote me, it's the Pele Yoetz. Okay, but that's just in brackets. Interestingly, he brings from the Arizal. He says the following from the Arizal, Hamachme al atzmoi b'chumras yiseiros muftach lo yishelech lekol hashana. You should know something. Generally speaking, we're not into being machmir. It's never, meaning, Yerushalayim, there's always room for doing more and being more careful. But with Pesach in particular, we find chumras, which normally speaking, we wouldn't even consider. And I'll explain what I mean. Normally a chumrah is an extension of a concern within a halacha. So for example, if you would apply that to Pesach, you would say, well, there's a concern that this might be chometz, so we're going to keep away from it, right? That would be understandable. But the levels of chumrah that's accepted by many, many people within Klal Yisrael, my own father parents have a chumrah not to eat manufactured products as much as possible on Pesach. Now, as growing up as a kid, I was so frustrated with it. I was like, come on, there's good echsherim, there's no chometz. You're telling me there's a chashash chometz? There's no chashash chometz. Come on, don't be stupid. What is this chumrah coming from, right? There's clearly an inyan by Pesach to take chumras another level, to go completely berserk, to be machmir on the slightest. There's people who don't draw water on Pesach, right? There's people who go, you know the story. There's people who have all sorts of minhagim on Pesach, right? But this lashon of the Pele Yoetz from Arizal kind of gave it context to me. He said, "Hamachmir al atzmai b'chumras yiseiros muftach leishliach lekol hashana." A person who's machmir dafka on Pesach, there's a promise, he writes, that he won't ever do a chet the whole year. Now, okay, whether it quite works like that or not is a question for debate. I'm not coming to answer what he says, but I'm saying the concept. The concept clearly is that it's very much a good thing when someone takes this this inyan of getting rid of chometz to such a degree that he's prepared to be machmir beyond the norm. It shows a certain dedication to the task at hand in that which it signifies, which is the battle against the Yetzer Hara. That's the key point. And he brings a tefillah, Pele Yoetz brings a tefillah that one should say when they burn the chometz, Kashem Shebianu Chometz Mibotenu v'Sorafnu Kach Dezakenu Levay Yitzhar Mikabenu. You see this theme again and again and again. The connection between, getting rid of Chometz and getting rid of the Yetzer Hara. Okay, fine. So the first side we've established is what it means getting rid of Chometz, and we've said from many sources it means to get rid of the Yetzer Hara. Disentangle yourself from the Yetzer Hara that little bit more, which leads us on beautifully to the next segment, which I want to talk about, which is the other theme of Pesach, which is Zman Cheyruseinu. Just before we expound on the Cheirus, I want to give a slight introduction, because I want you to understand that a Yom Tov carries with it a special Skulas Hazman. Every Yom Tov has a particularly unique spiritual opportunity which comes with that Yom Tov, and every Yom Tov carries with it that particular Segulas Hazman. And the Gemara at the end of Megillah, the last part of Megillah, Lamed Beis on base, it says, "Vaydaber Moshe es Me'ad Hashem b'nei Yisrael." Moshe spoke the Yom Tovim of Hashem to Klal Yisrael, and the Gemara says on that pasuk Ton Rabbanon, Moshe tiken lahem li Yisrael shiyu shoylin v'dorshin b'inyon shel yom. Hilchas Pesach v'Pesach, Hilchas Atzeres v'Atzeres, Hilchas Chag v'Chag. Moshe Rabbeinu instituted that Klal Yisrael should learn the halachas of the Yom Tov on the Yom Tov itself. This is separate to the other halacha, which is early on in Megillah and elsewhere, which is that Shloshim Yom Kodem L'Chag, 30 days before the Yom Tov, one should learn the halachas of the Yom Tov. That's something else. Here we're talking that on the Yom Tov itself, one should make sure to learn the topic of the Yom Tov. In fact, the Kaf HaChaim, in Tov Chof Tes Vov, he details the type of learning that one should do, and he doesn't limit it to Yom Tovim either. He includes within it the 4 parishes which are currently now up to Parashas Chodesh. He writes, Parashas Shkolim, a person should learn Mishnah Shkolim. In Parashas Parah, learn Maseches Parah. Kiddush on Parashas Chodesh, learn Kiddush Chodesh. Obviously, you learn Maseches Pesachim on Pesach, and so on. Every Yom Tov, a person should connect to the Yom Tov with the limud of that Yom Tov. Why so? So he brings from the Gemara Sanhedrin Kuf Aleph, where the Gemara says, Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar ben Chania says, "Kol hakirei pasuk bizmanoi mevi tova la'olam." If you read a pasuk in the right time, which is relevant to that time, you bring goodness to the world. Shenema v'dova be'itoy ma'tov, a matter which is in its time, how good it is. But the Derech Hashem is the one that specifically points to the opening comment I made, and he writes it in very Derech Hashem language. But essentially, what he says is, Or Godel sheheir bizman me'azmanim b'shuv tukufas azman hahu yoir or me'en ha'or harishon. The special spiritual light that was around at the source of the Yom Tov will return every Yom Tov that we keep, and a person will be able to benefit from that spiritual light. In other words, we are celebrating Pesach because of an event in history that happened. We left Mitzrayim. Says the Derech Hashem, though, it would be a mistake to think that all the spiritual heights that Klal Yisrael got to through Yetzias Mitzrayim was limited to that time. And all we do now, when we do our Yom Tovim, is we have some sort of memoriam. Says Derech Hashem, no. The same spiritual light, the same energy, the same tikkunim, the same experiences that were going on at the time that we are now commemorating, returns, comes back, becomes available to us when we keep our Yom Tov. Which means that every Yom Tov there is an opportunity to connect to a unique aspect of spiritual growth that is available to us from the power of the Yom Tov. Now we've spent time today talking about the fact that we're getting rid of Chometz and we're getting rid of the Yetzer Hara. You know that Pesach is called Zman Cheyruseinu, the time of our freedom. With the Derech Hashem in mind, we know that Pesach is not just a Yom Tov of commemoration of freedom. It's not just because historically we were redeemed from tormentors from the Mitzrayim. It's Zman Cheyruseinu, it's our time of freedom. We can become free on Pesach. In the Haggadah of the Chidah on Kaddish, on the word Zman Cheyruseinu, the Chidah writes, Yichavein bozeh gam al cheirus nafsheinu. A person should have in mind on the freedom of his nefesh, of his soul. And he goes on to say how it was betumah because of the klippos. I don't know much about klippos. But suffice it to say, we're after freedom from the Yetzer Hara. And the freedom that Pesach brings to us today, as we keep Pesach, is of the same may end. It is of that type of spiritual light that was then present. So with this we see the two themes interconnect. We said on the one hand, Pesach is about Chometz, getting rid of Chometz. And we said separately to that really, the second theme is that Pesach and Zman Cheyruseinu is a time of our freedom, because they interconnect together. Pesach is an opportunity for every single person to reflect and to work out what is it that today I am enslaved to. Baruch Hashem, we're not enslaved in physical terms, but we have elements of our life, and everyone will know their own life, but we have elements of our life where we are a little bit under the trappings, under the enslavement of the Yetzer Hara. Leiv yoidea moras nafshay. Every person will know their own personal things. I'm not here to dictate to anybody how to grow, what they should think of. But Pesach is the time when a person has the opportunity to succeed, to get out of that, whatever it might be, level of addiction that they have, or obsession that they may have, or the Yetzer Hara drives them in a direction which they're not really happy with, but they go along with it because that's what happens. Pesach is the time when we're able to connect to the Skulas Hazman of Cheirus, where we're able to get rid of the Chometz. We're able to fight the Yetzer Hara in ways that normally throughout the year it is unavoidable for us to be bound by. Normally we're bound by the rules of the Yetzer Hara, not on Pesach. Pesach is Zman Cheyruseinu. It's the time when we can really put effort in. And if we spend this time in the build-up to Pesach, thinking about it, there's a chance that when Pesach actually comes, we'll be able to maximize that and leverage that to our benefit. So we look forward, Be'ezah Hashem, to this Pesach being a time of Zman Cheyruseinu, of our freedom, the freedom, our personal freedom from the Yetzer Hara.
Chasal Sidir Pesach Ki Yilchu Soi Kechol Mishputoi Yechiku Soi Kasher Zuchitni L'sadai Lo Yisoi Kain Nizge